With the return of Dexter Morgan through Dexter Resurrection, I was thinking of doing a video about this series and had the perfect idea. Who could Dexter get on his table? I've selected some of the most prolific TV villains, mainly ones from realistic modern settings, although some are from odder stories and 2 are actually anime characters. He's not going to be hunting anyone with superpowers or people who don't fit his code. This will be done in 4 stages. For each of these characters, Dexter will first need to prove that they're a criminal like he always does, then it's a question of if he can locate them, and obviously kill them. Finally, the 4th stage is the cover-up. Can he get away with it? For the sake of this video, we'll say that Dexter does all these individually, and he would travel to each individual character's city, so he'll be on their turf. He'll have a normal level of resources as if it's Miami though. We'll also use Dexter in his physical prime, from the original series and not New Blood or Resurrection. By the way, as of recording, Resurrection's first season is only about halfway through, so there won't be any spoilers for that, and for the most part, no spoilers for Dexter or any of the series featured here, except some light spoilers. So, who are the targets going to be here? First, we have some fellow serial killers, Joe Goldberg from You, and Hannibal Lecter from, Hannibal. Next, we have some Kingpins, Tony Soprano from The Sopranos, Walter White, and, Kingpin, Wilson Fisk specifically from the Daredevil series. Since the original Netflix version of Daredevil is more grounded, we will be using that version of him for the first 3 seasons. And finally, 2 anime characters, because I am primarily an anime channel and I know you guys would want me to include some characters like that here. Particularly Johan Liebert from Monster, and Yoshikage Kira from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, though without a stand. He's kind of a bonus character. I know I'm going to be nerfing him here by not including his superpowers, but it's still a fun hunt even without powers, and this is the perfect type of criminal for Dexter to hunt, both for his crimes and because he's really hard to catch. When I originally set out to make this video, people did suggest I include someone from Death Note, but I'll be completely honest, I have not watched or read that story yet, so if it seems like a really obvious inclusion, sorry about not having it here. Though, if you do want to follow up to this video, drop a comment below with some characters you'd like to see. Let's start with Joe Goldberg. For Joe, things kind of change depending on the season of the show. We'll use him at the beginning of Season 5 when he's a publicly known figure and has a lot of people around him too. Sure, he's been mostly exonerated, but of course there are still rumors surrounding him. With all the weird things that have happened around him, some people suspect he's not what he seems. And Dexter's one of those people. Knowing Joe as a public figure now with a lot of money and power, Dexter is a bit suspicious, but he doesn't automatically believe everything. Though he's itching for a kill, and just to make sure there's no doubt here, he decides to look into Joe Goldberg. Maybe it's nothing. Time to research. Joe's life is shrouded in mystery, but some pieces don't really add up. Another issue for Dexter is the crimes themselves. They're spread out over years and across the world, with some that might be even impossible to link to him. It's not like the Trinity Killer either, where there's a pattern. Joe's kills are far different than that. And not all of them are necessarily linked to each other like Trinity's, where everyone knew it was one serial killer doing this. Also, with one of Dexter's kills, he did leave a jar of pee behind one time, but there's no way Dexter would even be able to get that or know that it's there. But I think it's worth mentioning because it shows how Joe is sometimes kind of sloppy with his kills. However, there are also a lot of living people out there that could confirm Joe's guilt, and a lot of other people that are suspicious of him and also looking into him. Joe being a more public figure kind of works against him because of this. Part of the story in Season 5 was people already suspecting him and deciding to see if he actually did anything. The issue is, it would be incredibly tough for Dexter to first find out about these crimes, then track them down and then use that as hard evidence. But it may not be needed. After observing Joe for a bit, it's a matter of breaking into his residence and finding anything he collected from the women he stalked, or simply finding his cage in the bookstore. Depending on how clean it is, Dexter might even be able to find trace amounts of blood down there, or at least evidence that blood was there. Joe is cautious and pretty smart, but not to the level of Dexter, I think, and also most of that has come with experience. In the earlier seasons, he was a little bit sloppier with his kills and such. Another thing working in Dexter's favor is that Joe has so many kills tied to him. Dexter simply needs to prove one of them, and that'll be enough for his code, even if he doesn't know all the murders. Oh yeah, one other thing to note here is that Joe sometimes pulls off some unrealistic speed feats in the show. A friend of mine brought this up to me and I thought he was joking, but apparently subsonic Joe is a thing, for combat speed at least, and this isn't really a power scaling video. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I want to take that into account here because this isn't a show with supernatural or superhuman characters. I think it was just purely unintentional and also a bit flimsy. Worth mentioning though in case anyone else brought it up because I am aware of it, I just don't see it as reasonable including here. And if you really do want to buy into that, let's just say equalize speed here. So Joe has a big trail of evidence and despite cover-ups, it's nothing Dexter hasn't encountered. He's easily investigated rich people covering things up before, like look at Jordan Chase and Isaac Serco, all of whom also had connections and criminal networks working for them, while Joe doesn't really have criminal allies, just money and cover-ups, and far more evidence. Joe is a public figure and easy to find, but killing him is another issue. Joe can get himself out of sticky situations and he can fight decently well, but I'd wager Dexter is better physically and better at thinking on the spot in these situations and a more experienced fighter in general, especially with his martial arts. Dexter might get on his radar by pretending to be a fan or something, but I don't see Joe anticipating this. But him disappearing would raise questions. So, Stage 1, investigation, mid-diff. Stage 2, tracking, mid-diff. Stage 3, killing him, somewhere between mid and high diff, just because Joe has been in these situations himself before. Stage 4, cover-up, high diff. Overall, mid-diff. Joe being a public figure works for Dexter tracking him and finding info, but it makes the cover-up a lot harder. Thankfully, by this point in the story, Joe's family and friends aren't too fond of him either, so if he disappears, they might look the other way, not care about it, or just cover it up themselves. The actual kill shouldn't be too tough though. Next, Hannibal Lecter, the TV version specifically. The hunt itself would be tough to start because he would need some way to be suspicious in the first place. Again, we are assuming Dexter's basically just traveling to these cities, so I would assume he'd just hear about this and he wouldn't have Miami Metro backing him or anything. He would just know the Chesapeake Ripper's going around and maybe try and collaborate with the FBI or something. Which is easier said than done, he's just a random guy passing through. So it's not like he'd have any support on this, and no reason to suspect Hannibal. Though Hannibal having connections to some of the victims and the FBI could serve to do that. Getting proof is easy though. Some of who are in his proximity, or the more Dexter-like approach, breaking into his house when he isn't present. Hannibal has evidence right in his fridge most of the time, and he collects trophies from all his victims just like Dexter does. It's those business cards he gets. After not much research into Hannibal, Dexter would undoubtedly notice his affliction for fancy foods and such, and maybe grow suspicious about the true origin of those foods, proving that his meats are human remains with no lab test. Combined with his trophies being random unrelated business cards, it is pretty obvious to a fellow serial killer like Dexter that this is a serial killer. Physically, the two are of a similar stature and are both experienced with hand-to-hand combat. I'd say both share a similar level of experience in this regard. Plus, Hannibal isn't stupid. Definitely even smarter than Dexter in some fields. And better composed too. If Dexter is anywhere in his proximity, Hannibal will harbor some sort of suspicion for him. Dexter rarely works completely separate from his victims too, and most of the times he ends up in their orbit somehow. Hannibal may even target Dexter himself, or at the very least grow suspicious of him. Potentially, he could try to manipulate Dexter somehow or befriend him, which I don't think Dexter would fall for, but the attempt would be there. I could see this going like that one time Dexter killed that therapist by becoming one of his patients. It would probably be something similar with Hannibal. So, Stage 1, investigation. High barrier to entry, but low diff once he's suspicious. Stage 2, tracking. Pretty low diff. Stage 3, killing. Very high diff. Hannibal is prepared and similarly matched. And Stage 4, cover-up. High diff considering proximity to the FBI. Though he could easily prove Hannibal's guilt when it comes to his crimes, but making him disappear is a different story. Leaving a body raises even more questions, and disappearing would start a manhunt, whether or not his crimes get known. Overall, pretty high diff. Definitely not impossible, but the Bay Harbor Butcher might be able to take out the Chesapeake Ripper. Next up, Tony Soprano. Not the first time Dexter's dealt with the Mafia. This one's different though. Proving Tony's guilt isn't exactly hard. It's actually really easy. He's a public figure and is known as an alleged mafioso, pretty high up in fact. So Dexter would suspect his guilt right off the bat. Tony has a long trail of crimes and he's not sloppy, but he's not the best at making things completely clean. Tony also has a lot of people working for him and a lot of influence. It might make him hard to reach because he usually has a lot of allies or family around, and most of the time, those two things are one and the same for him. There are times where Tony is alone, and it's not like he's always safe though, especially whenever he's with his side pieces. Dexter could easily lure Tony in somehow, like taking the phone of a Gumata or associate and texting him. Like, Tony's obviously cautious and he's not stupid either, but not all the time. I think Dexter could definitely outsmart Tony somehow. The kill would be a bit tough. Tony's a big guy. He's pretty tough, and while he might not be a skilled martial artist like Dexter, he's a strong brawler and can hold his own. Physically, he's pretty strong, and he's also pretty resilient. That is assuming Dexter gets spotted somehow. The cover-up isn't too hard. Dexter could easily pin the blame on one of Tony's associates, but it would probably cause a war between the families, as the natural blame would fall on one of Tony's rivals, and not Dexter. It would cause more chaos in the process. The FBI may investigate, but Dexter knows what they look for, and he could set something up to make it look like a hit job. Stage 1, investigation, low diff. Stage 2, tracking, low diff. Stage 3, killing, mid to high diff, depending on how Dexter approaches it, and Stage 4, cover-up, low diff. Overall, mid difficulty. Tougher than one of Dexter's usual victims, and probably on par with something like Isaac Serco because it is a pretty similar circumstance. Next, we have Heisenberg, Walter White. I also considered doing Gus Fring here, but I didn't want two Breaking Bad characters in the same video. I guess for this, we'll use Walt when he's at his most infamous as Heisenberg. There are plenty of breadcrumbs that can lead to his identity, and he becomes more prolific over time. Being part of a criminal network leaves more room for Dexter to find potential paths to that identity. Not to mention, it's not like everyone on that network likes Walt or wants him to stay alive. He'll have to fend for himself most likely. If Walt knows Dexter's coming, he could stay one step ahead and be prepared. And unlike Dexter, he utilizes weaponry and makeshift traps a lot. He's definitely very well prepared. Dexter has his M99, but Walter has a bunch of chemicals of his own that he uses in more unique ways. After Dexter confirms his identity, Walter's not really that hard to find. There's only a few locations he usually would be found, and catching him at home or the car wash is easy enough. The lab would be tougher to get into, but not impossible. Stage 1, the investigation, I'd say is mid-diff. There is a trail to Walter even though it is obscured, and Heisenberg is a known figure in law enforcement, as well as the criminal underground. So Stage 2, tracking, I would say is low diff. Stage 3, killing, I'd say is mid-diff. It really depends on when he catches Walt, mainly because of who's around him. If it's towards the later parts of the series where he has a lot of enemies and much fewer friends, Walt is working alone. Like if it were Walt at the end of Season 5, there wouldn't really be much in Dexter's way, but if it's when Walt starts first working with Gus and they're actually on better terms, it's definitely going to be a lot harder. Physically, Walt isn't a challenge for him, and if Walt doesn't expect Dexter, Dexter could easily knock him out, or no-diff him in a fight if need be. Stage 4, the cover-up, that depends on if Walter's working with Gus or not. Since we're kind of taking him at the height of his infamy, I'd say it's kind of in the middle because Gus's empire would definitely want answers as to who did that, and the DEA will want answers, especially Hank because he still likes Walt at this point. But if Walt's alone, the cover-up's really easy, because people would be relieved about him dying anyways. And there are plenty of people Dexter could pin the blame on. Overall, I'd say this is mid-diff. It really depends on where in the series Walt is. But using him at the height of his infamy, yeah, mid-diff sounds good. Next up, Kingpin. In the first 3 seasons of Daredevil on Netflix, Wilson Fisk has done more than enough to fit Dexter's code. He's very prolific publicly, and his influence is very wide in the underground. Suspecting wrongdoing from him is pretty easy too. The public is even wary of him. But proving it and stopping it is pretty tough, even for someone like Dexter. Stage 1, investigation. I'd say this is actually high diff for actual solid information. There's too many proxies, too many people working for Fisk, and his tracks are always being covered. But it's not completely obscured, and there are ways for Dexter to find out about him. Stage 2, tracking. I'd say that's mid-diff. Fisk is a public figure after all, but he's a very busy man with lots going on, so he could be in different places at different times. He's not always going to be easy to locate. Stage 3, killing. This I would say is extreme diff. Fisk is usually surrounded by allies, and even on his own, he's more than sufficient. He's far stronger than the average person, and even though the MCU makes him a lot stronger, the Netflix version of him still is basically a brick wall without powers. He's a big guy, and even taking him down with M99 probably would be hard, and he would even need an extra dose or two. Dexter has no chance fighting him. And Stage 4, the cover-up, extreme diff. Fisk has plenty of allies and business partners, and while not all are actually fond of him, Dexter is taking out the source of a ton of criminal wealth, and the police are paid by him too, so that's even more incentive to solve this case. Both because the public would want to know what happened to Fisk, and all of Fisk's partners worried about what's going to happen to them next. So overall, I'd say this is very high diff. Definitely not impossible, but this is a very prolific figure who could defend himself, and who has a lot of things working in his favor. Proving that he fits the code won't be as hard, but killing him is the actual tough part. I'd say from every single Dexter season, from Season 1 through Resurrection, Fisk would be tougher to deal with than any person Dexter's dealt with before. Now onto the anime side of things. We'll start with Johan Liebert, and I think Dexter's kinda cooked here. The issue is, Johan's always moving. He's not a publicly known figure either, and he has pretty unclear motives. Dexter's other targets, both in the series and even here, they have more obvious rhyme and reason to their actions. That's not to say Johan doesn't, it just wouldn't be easy for an outsider to decipher. Consider what Tenma had to go through to uncover everything. He basically devoted his life to doing it, and he actually knew who Johan was, directly being involved in his life too. Having someone else trying to pin it on Johan in the first place would be incredibly tough, and tracking him is even harder. The kill itself wouldn't be tough. Johan may even expect it and welcome it in order to keep Dexter going as a serial killer. Who knows, Dexter could somehow be part of his plan. There's no need for an elaborate cover-up either. Dexter would just need to be wary of Johan's allies. Stage 1, the investigation. Very high barrier to entry, and very high diff once started. There are too many twists and turns, but info is there for someone like him to dig for. Stage 2, tracking. Also extreme diff. Harder than anything Dexter has done. Johan's a ghost. He's always moving around, and he'd probably be aware of Dexter trying to find him too. It would be the most wide-scale investigation Dexter's ever done, with a lack of info to make it even harder. Stage 3, killing. If he does somehow find Johan, it's a low diff here. Johan isn't physically strong, and Dexter wouldn't be easily swayed by him. Johan usually would have a gun on him, or may even have Roberto around. That would make it tougher for Dexter, but not impossible, and I think this would be one of the easier kills if anything, assuming he even gets to Johan. And Stage 4, the cover-up, pretty much no diff. If he takes care of Johan's associates along the way, which I feel like he would anyways, then he's not really going to have much to worry about. It would be like any other kill of his. Johan being mostly unknown actually works in his favor here. So overall, very high diff. The killing's actually really easy. but tracking him and even investigating him in the first place, that's the really tough part. And finally, as a bonus, Yoshikage Kira. Kira killed people without a stand, and he seemingly used a blade to do this. So we'll just use a version of Kira that never got his stand and continued being a serial killer without any powers. He was undiscovered without it, so seemingly he was good at it before even getting a stand. Stage 1, the investigation, I'd say kinda high diff. Morio is not a massive place, and Kira lives a pretty quiet and unassuming life. Nobody ever suspected him in the first place. He got away with everything scot-free, and things only started to get messed up for him once he got his stand. Beforehand, he was actually fine and no one even suspected him. Stage 2, the tracking, I'd say low diff. Assuming Dexter could find out the cause of all these killings, once he pins it on Johan, it won't really be too hard to find him. Again, he does live a very low-key lifestyle, he's not out much, and he's pretty routined. Unless Kira has a suspicion about Dexter going after him, Dexter can very easily find him. Stage 3, killing. Nearly impossible if Kira has his stand, obviously, and the killings would be harder to trace if he had his stand too, but since we're using a version of Kira that doesn't have it, if you were just an average serial killer, low diff. Stage 4, the cover-up, I'd say mid diff. Kira disappearing would raise some eyebrows, but again, him living a low-key lifestyle kinda helps out here, though his father would definitely try to do something about it. Overall, I'd say mid diff. If Kira had his stand, pretty much impossible though, although it makes me wonder what Dexter's stand would be if he had one. Comment below, I guess. And that brings us to the end of this video. Let me know what you think below, or any other criminals you think Dexter could hunt. As usual, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.